Hello, you're watching Much Ado About Something, and I'm Donna. And I wanted to speak with you today and just talk with you and tell you some about my Appalachian background, some of my Appalachian history, and why you'll see a lot of Appalachian recipes and herbal remedies and things like that. You're going to see some of those in my videos. It's the Appalachian mountain heritage is so prominent in my life. It was one of the things that I just grasped onto and absorbed and loved and appreciated. And so it's part of me. It's part of who I am today. And so I just wanted to share with you why you may see a lot of Appalachian things on my channel, even though my channel is Much Ado About Something. And it's about lifestyle, which the Appalachian culture is part of that for me. It's about budget-friendly home and garden. So that's what my channel, Much Ado About Something, is about. And so you're going to see a variety of things there. But I know that a lot of Appalachian recipes and things like that are coming up in my videos. You're going to hear a lot of Appalachian language, and I'll share with you some things that we did growing up that I realized not everybody does. And so it's just a little insight. But the Appalachian background, the deep Appalachian background that I have comes from my mother's side of the family. This is my mother's grandmother. Her name was Mary, and I have a little book that I saved things about Mary. I have a photo album. I remember when she got her letter from the president when she was 100 years old. When she made it to her 100th birthday, she got a letter, and Mary lived to be 102. She lived a long life, and I attribute part of that to her belief, her what she practiced in her everyday life, and to her mountain heritage, the things that she knew to survive and take care of herself. And I admire those things, and I'm very much like this woman in a lot of ways, in that I love herbs, I love herbal remedies, and I love to eat foraged things that I know what they are. But a lot of things just come from, I think, this woman, my mother's grandmother, my great-grandmother. And I just wanted to share with you why you'll see some Appalachian references and recipes and things like that in my videos, even though this is not a video about Appalachian people or Appalachian, ways of life. It's not a channel about that. I maybe would love to have a channel about featuring Appalachian people. I'm telling you, they're just so rich in skills and colorful, and I would not hesitate to have a channel about that if I had time to share that much of it with you in a channel, and maybe that would be a good idea for another channel. But I'm just sharing with you today why, my Appalachian background. I'm just sharing it with you today. I'm not going to go into details with full names and birth dates and exact places, addresses, or anything like that. I don't want to give out that much information about myself on the internet. I don't want to share that much in detail, but I will give you the honest truth in general about my Appalachian background. Now, there are two kinds of people in Appalachia. There are people that love those mountains, that were born in those mountains. Their relatives were born in those mountains, and they'll never leave them. They love their way of life. They love the way it is there, even though it is changing a lot. You still have those people that love the mountains. And then you have the people that can't wait to get out of the mountains. Now, when my grandmother and great-grandmother and my mother lived up in the mountains, they lived way deep in the mountains. they were not wealthy. All of them did not have cars. They did not get out a lot, and they were secluded. They got cars later on in life, and they were able to get around on that mountain. But in general, they were just in their community. They were on their wherever it was that they were living at the time, and they didn't travel a lot. They knew their area. They knew their lifestyle. Mary was a midwife, delivered all of her babies, all of her children's babies, all of her grandchildren that I know of. I know she delivered my mother at home, and she helped people in her community. She helped them. She was, took natural herbs, and she was what they used as a doctor, because going down to the doctor was a long trip. Sometimes they had the means to go, and sometimes they didn't. It was very expensive. A lot of times these people didn't have a lot of extra money. They had their land and the things that they grew off of that land, and they were able to take care of themselves. But when extra things come up, a lot of the time they didn't have the extra money saved up to go to doctors and stuff. So they would come to my great-grandmother, Mary, and she would help them with her herbal remedies, and she would help deliver babies. She was well known for delivering babies, and they would pay her with sacks of flour and sugar and pigs, maybe a baby pig or something, and that's how they would pay her. And they just kind of bartered, and that's the way it was in my great-grandmother's youth, when she was a young woman. Of course, she had 10 children. She had 5 boys and 5 girls, and my mother was one of those girls. I think she was the second oldest girl, and she is the only one living today. 4 of her sisters have gone on before her, but she still lives in the Appalachian Mountains, and she did move away, and that's part of my story. Is my mother and her family, they never owned land. They rented houses. Actually, they picked crops. They were, orchard pickers. They picked apples and peaches and plums and cherries. They picked crops, and they traveled. My mother's mother and her dad, her father, and they would live on these shacks. Really, they were shacks, country mountain houses. I'm telling you, they were just. Donald and I sometimes talk about it when we visit people, and it brings us back to the memories of growing up and how our mother grew up. And I know how she grew up because she would share that with me, and we would go to the houses of the people that they worked for and the places where she used to live, and she showed me these things. And I wish that I had taken more pictures and I could have shared more with you, but they actually lived in these sharecropping shacks. That's what they were. And of course, there were 10 of them. There were 10 children, and then the mother and father, so there was 12 of them. And then sometimes they had family members that were hard on luck that would come and live with them. So quilts, wood stoves, carrying water. A lot of these places didn't have electricity when she was little. And those were things they did because that was the way of life, and that was a hard life. Well, my mother, she got married when she was 16 years old. My dad was 16. I think Mama turned 17 shortly after she got married, and then had a baby the next year. She had my sister, my older sister. So that's the way it was in the mountains. You married young. Mama married young, and Daddy was very young too. Daddy did not come from as far up in the mountains as Mama. Daddy was down lower near the big city. So you're going to hear me talk about the big city. And that's where they would go for doctor's appointments and things like that. Well, when Daddy and Mama got married, they lived in the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, for a little while. And then when Mama was going to deliver my sister, they came down And so they came down to what's called the flatlands, and nearer to the cities and nearer to medical care. Because by that time, of course, Mary was too old to deliver Mama's children. She was, up in her years, and Mama wanted to move closer to where she thought was better medical care to have her children. And they moved down for jobs because job opportunities were scarce and hard in Appalachia for my family. I know it might have been different for other people's families, but for my mother's family and for my family, it was a hard life up there. It was very poor and rich in a lot of ways of knowledge and, the simplicity of life. There was a wealth of that, but as far as having very much money or material things, they were very limited. And so they moved down here, down closer to the city so that they could have better medical care and get better jobs. And Daddy, of course, was looking for a job because he had married Mama and they needed, to support themselves. So that's how we came off of the mountain, even though we're very, very close to Appalachia, very, very close. And of course, we were raised there because that's where we went every opportunity that we got, like every weekend or, to visit family. And that's what we did. We went back to the Appalachian Mountains to do that. So that's part of me. I paid attention to that. I was drawn to that. That felt like home. And still going to the Appalachian Mountains today feels like going home to me. That's a part of me. Mama was one of the people that wanted to get off the mountain. She never wanted to stay there. She was an extrovert, and she felt, closed off and like there wasn't opportunities for her. And she wanted off the mountain. And so her and my dad did move down away from the mountain, even though we went back and visited. And a lot of our family are still there. And Mama did eventually go back. I can remember all of my life hearing her say that she would never go back up there. But she would tell us stories about being way in the mountains. And it would snow deep, and there would be no way that they could get out. So they were stuck up there in a tiny house with a lot of people for months and months at a time. She said that it was one snowstorm so bad that they took a red blanket and laid it out in the snow, and an airplane airdropped food supplies down to them. It airdropped dry milk, sugar, flour, and some food supplies down to that red blanket. And that's how they survived that winter. It was so harsh up there. Now, they raised pigs, and they killed pigs, and they raised a garden. And, of course, they had the orchards that they picked from. They were able to get the seconds, things that didn't go to market for the orchard owners. They were able to get all of those apples and things that they wanted. And they picked a lot of apples. And apples were a big deal. They were a major thing that they all picked. Now, when Mama's brothers got older, they went into the military. So she had, I'm not sure how many of them went into the military, but she had, I think most of her brothers went to the military. If not, I think it was about 4 of them. So she had brothers that moved away, as soon as they got old enough, they joined the military and they got to see the world, and then she had sisters who married and had children, and I have quite a few cousins on Mama's side. And when I think about visiting Mary, I think about her little house that we went to. She was 90-some years old when she lived in this little house. And we would go visit her. And when we were real young, we would roll down this big mountain that was behind her house. We would get on top of that mountain and just lay down and just roll down it. And we thought that was the greatest thing. And we would pick wildflowers and pick plants and rocks. We would go rock hunting, and it was just the most wonderful thing to go there. Of course, she had chickens, and when we were little, that was about all she could take care of at that time. She didn't have electricity. She had a wood stove. She had oil lamps, and she used an outhouse. And this was my great-grandmother, a very big part of her life, and that's how she lived. But this woman lived to be 102. I think she did move in with her son when she got a little older there. I'm not sure what age, but she moved in with her son. But she did live by herself in those conditions, without electricity, without heat. She had a wood stove for heat, and her bathroom was outside. She did have running water. She did have a well. But other than that, that's how she lived for most of, her life. And I had an aunt that lived very much like that. She didn't have a lot of electricity. And she later, as she aged, did get, a place that had electricity and everything. But for a long time, she lived exactly like her grandmother. And, you hear a lot about steels and a lot about moonshine. And, of course, that was part of our history, too. It was a way that people made money in the Appalachians, especially if you didn't have your own farm, if you didn't have your own business. It was just something that they did back in the day. Of course, nobody that I know of does that now. I don't have anybody that does that, but I know and Mary did not do that. She didn't moonshine. But there was family that we knew that's what they did, for their living. And it was just a part of it because it was a way to make money for the year, that you could buy shoes and pay taxes and to do the things that you needed to do. And we did have a relative that made moonshine on their back porch and blew their back porch off. We just had stories of it. It was part of who we were. Part of the environment that we were in. I never had to worry about that with my family. My family did not make moonshine or run moonshine or anything like that. So that was not that's not prominent in my memory because it's not what I remember the most. However, it is, I know that moonshine was always there, and they knew how to get it because that was our medicine. That is what tinctures were made out of. That is what cough syrup was made out of. That is what, they would even sanitize your wounds with it. If you got a skinned knee, that's what was on hand. That was alcohol, and yes, they would wet a cloth and put it on your skinned knee and sanitize your wound. That was part of our life. So even though we didn't, have make moonshine or anything like that, it was part of our life in that was medicine. That was tinctures. That was those things that I just described to you, and that's exactly what they used it for. Cough syrup. I know they don't use alcohol and cough syrup for children anymore. As we grow older and as we gain knowledge and as we live and people realize, well, maybe that was not the greatest thing to give to children. The way we were raised, they gave you cough syrup, when you were sick. But that was maybe once a year. I very rarely was sick growing up. There was a few things that we had, like chicken pox and measles and things that we were exposed to other people when we got. But there wasn't a lot of sickness. We grew up barefoot, running in the dirt, and eating healthy, pretty healthy. And there was there wasn't a lot of things to deal with as far as being sick. We just had a pretty healthy childhood. But Mom and Dad moved off the mountain and had their babies, and there are 5 of us. I have an older sister that's 2 years older than me, and there's me. I have a brother that's 2 years younger. I have a sister that's about 9 years, maybe 10 years younger than me, and a brother that Mama had when I was 16. So there are 5 siblings, and I have some very young siblings. And we grew up in a little bit different atmosphere. Like Mama always worked, and Mary never worked a public job other than delivering babies and things like that I know of. She may have, and I just don't know enough about the history to know. But she stayed at home and she worked at home. My grandmother, she worked in the mills, and that's part of people moving away from the mountains. They were moving to find jobs, and mills and furniture factories and things like that. That was a big part of the jobs in my mom's generation, that people left the mountains and went to work. My mom did work in mills and furniture factories and things like that, and that's the life that my mom had. My dad was a construction worker, and he was a construction worker as long as I can remember. And very, very hardworking people. Hard work won't kill you. It'll just make you think it'll kill you. That's a saying they used to say, hard work will not kill you. It'll just make you think that it'll kill you. But it really is a key to long life. My parents didn't know exercise. Exercise didn't exist because they worked, and that was their exercise. Mary worked, and that's how she exercised. She got up and moved and took care of her family and took care of her animals and took care of her household and her life. And so hard work was a way of life, and it was the way, that my family lived. But we grew up not far from the Appalachian Mountains, but not dead in the mountains where my mother and even where my father grew up. We didn't stay there. They moved us away. And of course, when I got married, I didn't marry an Appalachian because I went to school down here, and I fell in love, and I got married at 18 years old, and my husband was 20 when we got married, and we'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. So I married young, not as young as my mom, and then I had my first son when I was 20. I started having children when I was 20. So that's just a little bit about the Appalachian background. For me, it's still very much a part of me. I still go up there at least 2 or 3 times a month. I still forage up there, visit family. I still have a desire to go back and live in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, I don't know if that's going to work out for me and Donald or not, but that's my heart's desire. Is I feel like going there. I feel like that's home. But and that's why you'll see a lot of Appalachian stuff in my videos, because my recipes, even the way I talk, my speech, and just some of the habits, the things that we do that came from that background. You're going to see a lot of that in my videos. I wanted to make this video and share with you, give you an opportunity to understand where a lot of that comes from. And even though my channel is not about Appalachia, you will hear some of it in my channel because it's so deeply ingrained in me. It's so much a part of who I am that you'll hear some of it in my videos. Now, there is a channel that I love. It's called Celebrating Appalachia. And Tipper Presley, that's whose channel this is, Celebrating Appalachia. And she's an award-winning published author. She published for a newspaper there in her town, and she's an award-winning Appalachian. She's been recognized for her part in celebrating Appalachia. But if you really want to watch a channel that's about Appalachia, Celebrating Appalachia is a great channel. She still lives there, and she shares a lot of the things that she grew up with. And one of the things I most enjoy about watching this channel, Celebrating Appalachia, is that she shares with you their language. Appalachians have a unique way of talking, and it's just like any other language. There will be an accent depending on what part of Appalachia you're from. Appalachia is a very big space of mountainous terrain. It covers quite a few states there, but she'll the way she talks and the things that she says, it's just so familiar to me. And I enjoy watching it because I like to hear other people talk the way I talk. I like to hear people talk the way I heard people talking when I grew up. And I enjoy it. And then just to learn, I think she may have came from a little bit more affluent family than we did. I believe our family was down to the bare bones scrubbing, and we had some different experiences there. I mean, this is like butter and milk and things. We didn't always have access to that, my mom and dad. And, when they were up there and my grandma and them, things were harder. But that her channel, and her daughters also have a channel, the Presley Girls. That's worth looking up to. Looking and watching those channels. They just do great things and celebrate Appalachia. And I thought if you were really wanting to learn more about Appalachia in detail, those two channels would be two really good, interesting channels to watch. And it'll give you some insight on Appalachia today and what's going on today. I'll share with you parts of that in my life as they come and go, but that's not what my channel is about. So I just wanted to share that with you. And thank you for joining me today and let me tell you part of my history and share some of this stuff with you. I probably could talk to you for hours about it, but we won't make that video this long. And like always, until next time.